So, in your book, I've read some stories, and I know a little bit about you doing work with Ralph Moody, icon, legend in the industry. I want everybody to hear a little bit about that. When did you first do work with him? You know, what'd you learn from him? What'd you teach him? Because I know you probably taught him a little bit.
No, I don't know. I don't know about that.
I want them to know more about that part of your life.
Ralph Moody was instrumental real early in my career. I applied for some work at his place, and he hired me just as sort of a general fabricator. We were repairing a few cars. Mm-hmm. He had some people that he was working for on what was called the sportsman's cars back then. He'd bring cars in, and kind of like when I started my shop, we'd put a front clip on it or back clip on it. And Ralph was always instrumental in setting the car up and telling them how to do it. I also got involved when he was doing that high mileage car. Mm-hmm. He had a car, and I've spoken with some people that know where one of those cars is, but I remember we put a Volvo boat motor in a car, turbocharged it, and I remember riding in the car with him. It was a race car. I think it was his son's car. He was driving. I'd sitting over there, and we had a quart bottle, and we'd run that car till that quart of gasoline got done. And I was with him when we were getting 81 miles to the gallon.
Wow,
that was a pretty neat. That was a pretty neat car.
So, side note. People don't believe me when I tell them nowadays that in the 70s we had technology that got 80 miles to the gallon. So if any politician ever tells you they're worried about the environment, they're all full of crap, because the technology is there, but you got to remember, if we got 81 miles to the gallon, you'd never be able to pay to fix roads because your gas tax pays for your roads. So it is what it is. But not only did Ralph Moody do it, there was several back then. Smokey Yunick, there was a bunch of those brilliant minds back then. I think even Dave Vasselnook did some tinkering in that area. So the technology's been there, just so you all know.
Well, I can vouch for 80 3/4 of them all. I can speak about that. But while I was working with him, Humpy Wheeler, who was a big influence in my life, gave us an opportunity to run Janet Guthrie. She was a big deal, and Humpy was putting together one of his promotional projects, wanting to know if we would work on a girl's car. And
cool.
Ralph didn't have a problem with it, and that was working for him, so I didn't have a problem with it. So they brought that car down, and she was pretty insistent that if she came down, she didn't want some jackleg car. Mm-hmm. So he had Humpy, she talked to Humpy, she said she wanted a race-winning car, and he bought the car that I think AJ sat on the pole with at Daytona the year before.
Okay.
I'd be hard-pressed to... But I'm certain that's what it was. That's what's in my memory. It was an A.J. Foyt car that had sat on the pole, so it was a fast car. Mm-hmm. And I've got pictures in the book that show Ralph inside the car working on some of the front radiator duct work, and I'm over there working on a toolbox or something. So he was a hands-on mechanic, and as good a man as I've ever worked for. He and Mitzi, when we'd go to California, when I took her car to Ontario, we didn't have cell phones. But he gave me a list probably of 30 people I could call along the route. He gave me the two places, the hotels that I was going to stay at.
So if you have a problem in this state, you call this person.
You can call this guy.
Wow.
And when we got to Stillwater, I don't remember where it was, but I called home and he said, "You know that motor you got in the back of the truck?" He says, "We need that back." He found something wrong with a can. It was a spare motor, or somebody bought it. Mm-hmm. He says, "Take it to Albuquerque." He says, "Al Unser will meet you at this truck stop." We went there and we unloaded that thing and built a wooden shipping crate for it and took it to the airport in Albuquerque and sent it back to California. So I got to eat lunch with Al Unser. He bought.
Oh, wow.
He bought lunch, yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
But anyway, he knew people all across the country. Literally, I bet those people probably weren't 100 miles apart. I had a whole list of people. He cashed my paycheck, gave me next week's paycheck, and expense money.
You know that. So there's a lot of people in all industries that get a better reputation once they're no longer with us. But that right there verifies that Ralph Moody was as good as everybody says he was because of that network. You don't get that kind of network of friends that'll help you out clear across the country unless you really are that good a guy.
He was just a gentleman, and he was knowledgeable, and he called everything a shit box. Every car, that's what he called it. He said, "Bring that over here. I'll look at it." And after I quit working for him, we were having a conversation about something, and I said, "Ralph, I was wanting to write a chassis book, not the one that I wrote, not the one that I published." But I said, "I'm asking these people questions," and he said, I said, "Ralph, I must be making these people mad." I said, "I don't know. Have you heard anything? Am I doing something that's ticking people off?" He said, "No." He says, "I've heard about that." And he says, they're not mad at you. They're ignoring you because not only do they not know the answers to the questions you're asking, they don't understand the questions.
They never even thought of those questions.
And I'll say this, that who's petty screw chief?
Dale Inman.
Dale Inman was the last guy. I could talk to him, and I learned a lot from Dale Inman, an awful lot. One was to cheat neat and give them one thing.
Yep.
Make one thing obvious, because they'll catch that and then they'll let you go. They think they caught you.
Yep.
They pump their chest, and you just go on and run. And then one day at North Wilkesboro, I was talking with Ralph Moody, and we were walking with Cale Yarborough across the track when Holly Farms was promoting a race and giving away chicken. So if you have your ticket, you could walk over there across the backstretch to a building and get a free lunch.
Yep.
And I'm with Ralph, so I'm just walking with Ralph, but Ralph's having a conversation with Cale Yarborough. I am not in that conversation. I'm just tagging along. We go over there, and Ralph is sitting here. Cale's on the other side of him. I'm one row down, kind of one seat over. And Banjo comes, and I was talking to Ralph about what was the advantage of a drop snout. What were you trying to gain if you built a drop snout car? And Ralph we'd had this conversation about people not understanding what I was asking him. And here comes Banjo across the infield. Ralph says, I saw him reach over and hit Cale like that. And then he said to me, "Ask Banjo that question." And
it was a setup.
Oh, yeah. Ralph set me up on that one. So Banjo gets his chicken. He comes over, and he's one row down, one seat over. And he's taking his chicken out, and he's putting it on, opening up a napkin, and he's taking all the stuff out of his box, and he's putting it on that thing. And I started asking him, I said, "Hey, Banjo," I said, "what's the advantage of what are you gaining when you put a drop snout on the car?" I said, "How much does it change the roll centers, and are you not concerned about an increase in caster gain and camber gain?" And I'm asking him 2 or 3 of these questions, and all of a sudden he starts picking all that crap up, putting it back in his box, and he gets up and leaves. He never said a word to me. And Ralph's up there, he and Cale are just laughing their butts off. He set me up for that so bad. That was one of my good Ralph Moody stories. But he was really good to me, and he was always good about, he and Rossi both, they both use the same term. Be sure, do your best to determine, if there's a problem, do your best to determine probable cause. Look beyond what's broke.
Right.
What made it break?
Yep.
Yes. Is it an outside thing, or is it a structural thing? They taught me to look at things deeply before you made a decision. So I remember that, and his kindness. And he said at one point too. He said it was not at North Wilkesboro. He said one time. He said, if you'd have come along just 3 or 4 years earlier, he said, I'd have had something for you.
Really?
No, I took that.
Wow.
I took that.
That's a huge
my imagination was, I might have got a deal out of that thing.
Wow.
But Ralph was always good to me. He'd always come to me and say, "Come here, bud. Look at this." He'd see something. He said, "Look at this." Whether it's a motor or for a car or whatever. And when we'd go places, and he would be the consultant for a guy, and he'd call me over and say, "What do you think this is?" And he was getting me to assign probable cause. He was giving me practice.
So I had a deal like that with Ray Stonkus, and he was crew chief in the truck series the one year that I was a rookie crew chief in the truck series. And I know they were busy and they were racing for points, and I was on a lesser team, and we weren't racing for points. We were just trying to do all we could each week. But I would run to Ray Stonkus all the time, and I would ask him questions, and he would never give me an answer. I would tell him what I thought. And if I was out to lunch, he'd say, you know, Bill, think about it this way. And he would go through a scenario. And usually through the scenario, I would say, how about this, and this? And if I was on target, he'd say, I might try that, you know. But it was never a Billy do this, Billy do that, and so I guess my Ralph Moody was Ray Stonkus that year, and I know he passed away a couple years ago, but I respect Ray and will respect Ray Stonkus till the day I die, because he always took time for me, never gave me the answer, but never let me flounder, you know. and I so that was that. Well, I understand that relationship with Ralph. Because I had it with Ray.
Ralph was always just so gentle, but did not mince words, getting to the point about what he used to always call a car a S-box. Bring that S-box over here.
They are. Some are shinier and some are not so shiny, but
yeah.
Because they all fight us.
He was good. I never got short of money. Like I said, when I went to California, I got that week's paycheck, next week's paycheck, a bucket of money, and a little extra spending money.
Truck money, yeah.
And that list of people that if I got in trouble, and I never had to use that. But
I love it.
But I did get to meet Al Unser.
Wow. So that was the Kelly girl stuff, Janet Guthrie. And then I know you built like a dirt car or two with him?
I did. I think probably the first. Wasn't the first thing. The first thing I did at my shop was a baby grand car for Ronnie Thomas.
Ronnie Thomas.
A Vega. Yeah, it was pretty nice. The car did really, really well too. I did. Ralph got asked by a gentleman that owned an oil company in Marietta, Ohio, if he would build him 2 cars for his 2 boys, and Ralph obviously said yes, but he called me. He said, "You know, will you build them?" He said, "I'll tell you what to do."
Yeah.
And he did. I looked at those pictures, and if you see any pictures of Ralph standing by those cars, those 2 cars have those posts over the jacks.
I've seen the pictures.
Did you see that? Yeah.
I've seen the pictures. Yes.
So that would have been the first time in how I talked Ralph Moody into doing that. Yep. I don't know. And it's also got them little tabs, so it had that crossbar in them.
Wow.
But so he did it, and we used, it had all rubber bushings. We had front lower strut rods modified, were actually trailing links on the rear end housing. But we did 2 of those cars, made them as Corvettes, and you know those squares that I made for measuring the CG height off the ground? That was the first car we tried that. I think that dimension was 16.5 inches off the ground.
Yes.
We did that to those 2 cars. Those 2 boys came down and practiced at Metrolina with dirt. Ralph drove both cars. He set up both cars. He taught both of those boys, you know, what they should do on dirt. And they had previously been driving an open wheel car, a 4-year-old Surtees Formula 5000 open wheel car. And we took those things to some place out in the middle of Nebraska. And one boy sat on the pole. The other guy, they both sat on the front row. The guy that sat on the outside pole won the race. The guy that sat on the pole finished second. We drove home. We got home, and we get home, and the mom's fixing us breakfast. Wow. And she sets her coffee down in front of her old man, of her husband, takes his hat, put it back on his head like that, and he said, you give them, he's talking about me and Ralph, you give them boys that old car they got out in the shop. We ain't racing that thing no more. She was so happy that they were doing good in an enclosed car.
Yep.
So they gave me their trailer, welded a hitch on Ralph's pickup truck, and in that trailer I got that Formula 5000 open wheel car, and Ralph got the motor out of it.
Wow.
And that's the I took that car, disassembled everything off the tub, put the tub on my frame rack, jigged up all the suspension points, and built that twin turbocharged Buick V6 mid-engine car.
Yes.
That car had a 5-speed Hewland transaxle, still had reverse in it, which is unusual out of a race car. But
So the Ralph Moody time, that kind of opened the door for you to meet Humpy Wheeler, because Humpy helped that program, the Kelly Girl deal, a lot.
He followed us through that whole season.
And so through that relationship and that meeting, Humpy is the one who was really key in getting you the Cardinal tractor deal, your first team owner car, which was the first car that Dale drove for you.
Before that, he put me up with Ricky Rudd's dad.
That's okay.
Yep. So about 3 races into the season, I got hooked up, and I was Ricky Rudd's crew chief in 1977.
This is the year he won Rookie of the Year.
Yes, sir. We won Rookie of the Year, and in writing the book, I remember I called Ricky twice. I think I've shared this with you. We ran 25 races together. If you look in the record book, in 10 of those 25 races, we finished in the top 10.
Wow. How many cars did you have?
We had one car.
Yeah.
I called Ricky twice.
Yeah.
I said, am I remembering this right? Yeah. I only remember having one car.
One car, 25 races. Probably a small handful of guys, maybe 4, maybe?
I had 2 full-time employees, and we had a volunteer pit crew.
Tell these kids nowadays you got to do it that way.
Oh, man. I can't imagine that. First time I met Ricky, my first approach with Ricky was when I was with Donnie. In 75, we were at North Wilkesboro. We'd run really, really well. But Donnie was having problems with brakes. And he came in, he said that number 22 car keeps backing into me. And the problem was Donnie was running out of brakes. But after the race, we're loading our car, and here come it was the 10 car. Ricky was driving Bill Champion's car. Mm-hmm. And Ricky and I talked about this. I don't know if he'd ever driven Bill's stock car or not, but he was big into racing and some other kind of a car with Bill Champion. Mm-hmm. And Bill said, "Get Ricky ready. He's sick." Bill needed to get out of the car. Mm-hmm. Well, Ricky never driven a stock car. NASCAR didn't know nothing about Ricky Rudd. But he went and got one of Bill's old, nasty, used driver's uniform on. And I think I write in the book it was a size 20 kid in a size 40 driving uniform. just hung all over him. And he had his helmet, and he had big old long hair. So when he came in after the race, their truck was parked just 2 doors from ours. He gets out of this car, and there's no visor on it, and them old bubble goggles, and hair sticking out that helmet every which way. Just big old head of hair on his boy. Yeah. Just a skinny kid, and how he got away with that, they must not have watched him trade drivers or something, but he never passed any tests or nothing. He just jumped in that car and drove it. So I've always been impressed with Ricky in that regard. And I've only got one picture of that car with any dent on it, and I looked in the record books and didn't show us any crashes, but it said we lost a motor at Rockingham, and I've got a picture of us pulling in Rockingham. We're still in that blue and gold, or black and gold car. Yeah. And we've got a wrinkled right front fender, so he must have blown the motor and tagged the wall. But and I looked in record books. We never crashed, and he never got that thing upside down or squirrely or nothing. Man. And we were at Talladega. I don't remember which first or second Talladega. We lost a motor, and he didn't have any motor. We didn't have a spare. So this story doesn't happen very often. Ricky's dad, Al Rudd Sr. I can't remember who. I think Robert Yates went to Robert Yates and says, "We need a motor." And he said, "Well, I got one here, and I don't remember. Let's just say it was $7,500." Mm-hmm. He says, "Well, can I pay you later?" And then he said, "Yeah." I don't know how it worked, but he got this used motor from Robert Yates on credit. We put it in that motor, in that car, and we ran as high as third. I think we even led. Not from passing people, but we just ended up leading for 3 or 4 laps. And when we got done, the pay for that race was $7,550.
Oh my God!
We went on with $50.
Yeah, at least pay the debt. Yeah,
but we ran good. He ran really, really good. I'm sure a lot of people noticed that. Wow. And the first race I went with him with Michigan, we actually did lead the race. I mean, we actually. Yeah, I don't remember passing everybody, but we led and they couldn't catch us for a while. We could hold our spot 5 or 6 laps. That was pretty good. But then, and then Humpy also got in touch with me. I think most people know this story. I was supposed to be, he wanted to know if I'd be the crew chief and car owner for the first black stock car driver.
Yes.
It wouldn't have been, but that's what he said.
Right.
We got Willie T. Ribs involved, and he and Willie just had a little bit of a falling out. I've heard different things, but for me, I've heard that he didn't come to the track, but he did. He came twice, and he just couldn't seem to he couldn't drive in the right place. And I remember Humpy drawing some things on a napkin. You know, when you buy the orange ball, you should be here. When you go by the gate, you should be here.
Yeah.
I wasn't involved in that too much, but they didn't get along. And that night, or that afternoon, second afternoon, he came down pit road, past us, pulled right up next to the pit wall, so close that when he got out, he stepped over the pit wall, and I've not seen him since. But then they've written about in the newspaper, he got caught going the wrong way on Queens Avenue in downtown Charlotte. And for some reason, he got out of the car and took off. Well, it's a Charlotte Motor Speedway car, so they kind of had an idea
How to find him.
They weren't going to have trouble finding him.
Yeah.
And the story that I remember was that he's a young black man. He went to an open door gymnasium and started playing basketball, just shooting hoops. My guess is he thinks he's a black man shooting basketball hoops in Charlotte, North Carolina. That's not going to stand out amongst anybody. But right away, I guess 2 policemen come in, put him up against the wall. And he said, "How come you knew it was me?" And he said, "Son, when you came in that door, you ran right past that sign that says, 'This is an all-girls school.'"
Oh, no. Oh, no.